indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first item is, I'm sorry. Committee members present, myself and Mr. Melvin Campbell. Board members present are Earl Campbell, David Scrivenger, Christina Blas, Lillian Orishak, Kathy Romine. Also here is Superintendent Dr. Rodriguez and of course Robin Cushenden. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Oh, Wendy, excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay, approval of the agenda, so moved. I second it. All in favor? Aye. Approval of the July 22nd minutes. Okay, any issues or questions? No, you moving to accept? I'll second. All in favor? Aye, unanimous. Okay. No public comments. Before we begin the continuation of the review, before a couple of you arrived, we were discussing at the agenda setting meeting that we're faced with a decision that it's highly doubtful that we can finish tonight, which is what we would have to do in order to put the new manual into board docs prior to next Tuesday night's meeting. Now, the reason, the rationale was to give the board, all board members, sufficient time to look over the document. What I'm proposing is, and we are not going to do that just because it takes as long as it takes. And we could rush through this thing and spoil the work that we've been doing for 6 months by making mistakes in the context of let's finish tonight, okay? So what we're going to do is distribute this. We might have to have another meeting this week to finish it up, but we're going to distribute the new manual at the board meeting on the 6th to the members. We will not discuss it, but it gives the members from the 6th of August until the 16th or 17th of August, depending on when it went into the agenda, sufficient time. If you look, notice the book here. Robin has formatted it so it is very, very easy to look at the old policy, see what the changes have been. 10 days, I think, is more than adequate to be able to do that, especially if it's at the risk of doing less of a great job than it could. The first thing I'd like to deal with is I went through a year and a half minutes and found 4 items that had been passed as a motion by the board, but not yet one of them was codified in the new manual, and that's the authority to operate a school. That's all set. But there are 3 other motions that took place at the April work session, and they need to be codified. So I'd like to propose a new policy now. And the title of the policy would be Financial Oversight. And it would read as follows. The board recognizes its fiduciary responsibility. Financial oversight is a major component of that responsibility. Therefore, 1, any contract totaling more than 0.1% of the total district budget must be approved by vote of the full board. That was ratified on the 27th of April at the work session. Point number 2, any contract signed for more than $100,000 must be presented to the board for information purposes on a monthly basis. 3, the board will be advised on a monthly basis of all external documents of all the external to the district that have been signed by the chair. I will move the, yes, David. Let me move a motion first, okay? Move that we accept that, Mel seconds it. Okay, David.
I remember alerting the board that we had no financial policy. So I remember alerting the board to the fact that we had no financial policy and we needed one. So I'm all for that. I would like if you'd add something in there general about adhering to national standards or something for those other than the three instances that you mentioned.
Best business practices? Is that?
Yeah, something like that.
That's financial
Just so that
management
we,
practices.
yeah, just so that we can hook all the ARs into that, or the OSs, or whatever they are. And say that these are best practices, or nationally recognized practices.
So how about if we have, financial oversight is a major component of that responsibility, and the board's expectation is for the district to employ nationally recognized best practices and standards.
That's
Okay?
So, just so I understand, are we saying that anytime we make a purchase over $2,500, it has to come to the board?
No.
That's more than 0.01%.
0.1% of the total combined
Not
budget.
0.1.
That's the operating budget plus the
Okay.
capital improvement
Okay.
plan.
150,000.
So,
No, it's really 300 something.
300,000.
You don't have the capital.
So, I'm looking for a dollar figure that we're asking the district to bring back to the board every time.
Would you do the honors?
Sure.
So-
Yeah. 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 This is the result of a couple of times that board was informed much after the execution of the contract, a multi-million-dollar contract.
Well, I'll never do that.
You know.
I'm not gonna. So, I understand past experience, but $1 million stuff, I'm talking with you guys. Let's just be clear.
And I do imagine that, Dr. Rodriguez, I do imagine that to be true, but I do get both sides of the spectrum, if you come into that, but I think that it's not about the person, it's just about the actual position.
I get that.
And so there's no in between.
Well, Mr. Smith, so let me just clarify what I was trying to say, and that is, I get that, completely respect it.
Right.
What I want to encourage us to do, right, is, and I'm not opposed to financial oversight, board responsibility, I get that, but wherever we land, right, I don't want us to overcorrect the pendulum, okay? Because I've seen it, right? And I've seen it where it paralyzes the system. The system can't get anything done. We're waiting to execute on stuff before we bring it to the board, right? And we're waiting to execute on something, first bringing it to the board. And if it's a high enough bar, it works, that where you're comfortable. But if it's too low of a bar, we can't do it, we can't operate. And then what that does is kids suffer, because now we're going 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, before we can get anything done that we believe is good for kids, you know? So that's where you'll hear me sort of push a little bit on.
Okay, what's the bar?
Well, if you say, I don't know exactly, but it's about 350 million is the total budget, correct? That's, I believe
Okay.
it's somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Yeah, approximately.
350,000.
So it'd be 350,000.
So 0.01,
Would be, well,
350,000.
no, you said 0.1%.
0.1%.
Yeah, that's
Right.
my point.
So that's 0.001 times 350 million equals 350,000.
Okay.
So that's the number we're talking about.
Believe me,
But,
if,
yeah, and just an observation. I agree about the pendulum example, but for pendulums to get in the middle, and if they're too far to one side,
I would
they have
argue
to swing a little bit.
I would argue the opposite. Why can't we just get it right, put it in the middle, and move forward, guys? I'm telling you, our system, my motto for us, because I know we've been through a lot as a system, but my motto is, let's move forward, guys. We gotta turn this system around. We gotta move it forward for our kids. And I'm here to work with you, and I'm here to support you, and I'm gonna do the right thing, okay? And you know, I want you to understand that, because I don't wanna go like this, and like this, and like this, to end in the middle. Let's just get to the middle, and let's just start running. I'm ready to run. I want my staff to run, and run forward, but they can't run forward when they're always looking in the rearview mirror. And we're asking them to look in the rearview mirror all the time. You know, all the time. I'm telling you, you know, well, I won't say that part, but I'm telling you.
Just, we got a public that has large segments of it that have zero confidence in our ability to manage the fiscal responsibilities of the district. And those people are gonna have to be satisfied if you want November 5th to work out.
I understand, you know, and I'm gonna get out there, and I'm gonna talk to people, I'm gonna communicate with people, and my actions are gonna demonstrate I'm an honest guy, I work the right way, you know, and that's just how I am and how I operate, you know, and I just want to, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
trying
you're
to say
fine,
something.
you're fine, this is just to clarify.
And I don't want us to be paralyzed by the past. I want us to be able to run forward, guys. We can do so much for our kids here. I know we can, you know. I just want us, I want us to just, I want us to run. I don't want us to crawl. There.
And I don't know anybody who doesn't want to move forward, okay? The dichotomy is that some people believe that you cannot move forward without understanding the past and correcting the past, as opposed to developing amnesia, which is
I understand. I don't, you know,
Okay.
I'm a history guy. I taught history. I get it. I know history, you know, issues and all that kind of stuff. But
all right. So 350? Okay. All
I'm
right.
just
We'll
gonna
vote.
make a clarifying point, I want
No,
to hear what that
make
motion
sure
is.
that's the right
John,
point.
can you read it, please? Because it was the smallest of baby steps, that wasn't even a negligible movement of the pendulum. I want to hear it again, what
Okay.
you have.
The board recognizes its fiduciary responsibility. Financial oversight is a major component of that responsibility, and the board's expectation is for the district to employ nationally recognized best.
No, I'm asking for the point one.
Oh,
Okay, good, that's
All right.
sorry, John.
Any contract totaling more than 0.1% of the total district budget must be approved by vote of the full board.
So let me just say how that recommendation came out of Finance Committee and how the board adopted it. There was more verbiage to that, okay? If it was already factored into the budget, the board wouldn't have anything to do with it. This would be above and beyond what was already built into the budget, okay? Which means you're gonna be, the board will be presented even more seldom with those types of decisions. And it was, I believe, purchases and or contracts, it was both. We've got to go back to that original motion, we got to get it right, we have to understand what the board approved that night. It was a small baby step.
Which reference to items already in the budget.
That are not covered in the budget. This was outside of the budget even. So this wasn't even really a big step forward for the board. This was a minor tweak. It was basically, we had no significance. And this was, a little baby step in the right direction.
This just goes back to our point, you can't
Yes.
change the wording of the motion, we need to put the motions in there.
Gotta have the motion.
Exactly as they were approved.
Yes.
And then we can elaborate on them if we want, but we need to put the exact wording that was approved. Because now that you mention it, I do remember that budget caveat to get around the issue that Frank was raising. If it's already been approved in the budget, then we're good.
Yep.
Yes.
So we we had this discussion before, John, that it has to be the motion. We've had this discussion here at your meeting. Do you recall that discussion?
Yes, I recall the discussion. The discussion was, does a policy have to contain the exact language of the motion? And I think the consensus was, yes, but that will not be the only language in the policy. Reason is, if you look at the way we run meetings, a lot of motions are made on the fly. If somebody thinks it up 10 or 12 seconds before they make it. So you haven't time to vet it in your own head. Is this bulletproof? Is it legal? The way that we asked Wendy Cartlidge to run a legal sanity check. So even though that motion that passes the board has the force of policy, it still should be put into verbiage that makes it a constructive policy and goes through the 3 reading process. Just because it passed as a motion doesn't mean that it's not subject to the 3 reading process that any other policy has to go through. Because you've got in effect a policy, let's call it a lowercase p, okay? So the will of the board has been expressed. So as long as any individual language does not modify the intent of what was passed, you can't have a policy that just says, well, I wrote it out of the motion summary. Any contract signed for more than $100,000 must be presented to the board for information purposes.
That one
But
was
you
correct.
modified
That one was correct. That one was correct, what you just said, but the other motion is not accurate.
Oh,
And it's not what the board approved, and I think maybe the best way to verify that is to,
on
maybe the audio.
it's in the motion summary for the 27th.
which meeting?
27, did you say?
May
May 7th.
It would have been the work session.
The work session.
Well, May 7th, the board approved the 100,000 or more for information purposes. I don't know when the other one was approved.
The other one was approved the 27th.
Same night?
Yeah.
No, not
Same
the
day.
27th.
Hmm?
May 7th, John, the $100,000 for information one was approved.
Then why is it in the minutes, some motion summary for the 27th of
I
April,
can't answer that.
that we approved on the 7th of
I
May?
know, we approved it at county council chambers, so, yeah, it was there.
You said April 27th?
Yep.
Robin, I think we tabled it on the 27th, and we took it up again on May 7th at the county council chambers.
I'm going to do the 26th and 27th first to read, but the motion summary so that John can have what.
I just want to present something to y'all for your consideration while we're waiting.
Could you read it for everyone?
Oh, did you find it,
Please.
Robin?
A motion was made at the board to be informed of any contract value at $100,000 or more for information purposes monthly. The motion was seconded and passed. A motion was made that monthly, so is that the one that you were talking about?
No.
A motion was made, except in an emergency, the board should authorize purchases and/or contract with a value of 0.1% or more of the most recent approved comprehensive budget, except when such purchases have received specific line item approval in advance. The motion was seconded and passed. Is that the one you were talking about?
Well, that's the one with the detail we were missing.
Okay.
Raleigh, go up
So-
farther in the minutes.
Okay.
The one for the $100,000 for information's sake is actually tabled up in the minutes, but in the summary, it's passed. It was probably just a typo in the summary, but I do recall taking up the 100K and above at the following meeting, which would make sense if it was tabled, and why it would be on the May 7th agenda. So that, it's just a little confusing, but.
So, board signature authority in the minutes, okay, motion tabled from March 19th. That was
I think
okay, so this one was not tabled, so board signature authority, Mr. David Strivenger made the motion, accepted an emergency, the board should authorize, so that went through, and that was 9-1. The second was, Mr. David Strivenger made the motion that the board be informed that any contract valued at $100,000 or more for information purposes, the motion was second. The motion was made to table, the motion was made to table the previous motion. The motion passed 9-1.
Well, all I know is we took it up again on May 7th, and if you watch the video, that's when you'll see the vote on.
But that doesn't really impact,
So May 7th.
when it was passed, doesn't impact.
No, it does not.
I will amend my motion to have point number 1 read exactly as it is summarized in the motion, okay? All right, good. We should vote. All those in favor? Passed. So.
So what Joanne said, the motion was moved again on May 7th. The motion was made to inform, and that was tabled from the April 27th work session. That's on May 7th.
This is why it takes as long as it takes. All right. We'll go, yes, David.
After this discussion, I would suggest that when we put motions into policies, we put when they were approved. You know, like we cite them.
Oh, boy, yeah, that's a good
So,
idea.
motion
Citation.
motion approved on May 7th, da-da-da-da-da.
Just connect it, yeah, that's fine.
It would just prevent these kinds of discussions.
Okay. Yeah. Where exactly did we leave off?
Mrs. Cutlass.
I just wanted to bring something to y'all's attention. Mr. Strivenger, I really appreciate how you had spoken at a meeting about how important it was to reference board policies in our administrative regulations. That's something we need to do. Dr. agrees for many of them. So I've been working on some administrative regulations, and on the uniform grading policy, I was looking at our board policies and making a reference down at the bottom of the page, and I kind of listed the title, like mission or objective. So I just wanted to talk to you about 59-1990, because you don't have all these statutory duties that you possess in your policy manual. And today I was with Mr. Grissom talking about residency checks where people live, and under 50-1990, prescribed conditions and charges for attendance. I mean, that's part of your general powers and duties, and then establish the annual calendar, that's in the supplement. And so I just wanted to ask you if you would like me to work on this with you, because I want to make sure we define, if we had defined these clearly, then your motion, and we now have the policy about operating or not operating public school or schools, we have all these statutory authority lists in our policies, and y'all would have been in the situation you were in. So I don't know all the past history, but it just came up again today. And I just want you all, I just don't know why, I don't know why you all didn't have that in your policies before. I mean, was there a reason why?
Oh, there is a reason. But we're looking forward, we're going forward.
It makes sense to me, although we may have a general policy that says we're going to adhere to all state, federal.
All state,
Right.
federal,
So
all
that's-
statutory, and
that's kind of-
and rules and regulations of the
Yeah.
State Department of Ed, because for example,
Yeah,
the program
You
policy.
have that, so you can always link it to that.
And their rules and regulations are something to cover, I just don't know it at all.
And you made changes back here, so you started reviewing your changes. You went through and reviewed your reviewing your changes.
Right. If you can recall exactly where we left off.
So you left off
I can
at
tell you.
policy 2.1, under board rule, role, and job description, and you made change to section B.
Which one?
Right here.
Okay.
This was the last change that you made.
All right, good. All right.
Okay,
So we're on,
over here. That was the last change you made.
okay.
Yes.
All right, so let me
You went down here.
call your attention to the last change that we made, which was the regular term of office for each board member is 4 years. The term of office for board members elected during a regular election commences 1 week after the certification of the election. Yeah. The problem is, we don't know how we're going to implement that because of the fact that people will certify and run for office based on a 4 year. And that whatever year it gets implemented, and some people are going to be shorted 2 months out of their term. So we've got to figure out when the best time to do that is, okay? But let's continue with we have. Within 1 year of taking office, board members will complete an orientation program on the powers, duties, and responsibilities of the board member. All board members must be qualified electors. That's pretty boilerplate. Board members are prohibited from dual office holding. So can't run from council and be on the board. 2.2, governance commitment. This is right out of the statute. The board is a political and corporate body of the state. The legally constituted governing body of the district is the board. The board is comprised of 11 members who reside in designated areas within the boundaries of the county. The board's powers are derived from the state constitution and acts of the General Assembly. Consequently, the board may only perform those acts for which some authority exists. The authority may be expressly stated or implied, either in state law or in rules and regulations of the State Board of Education. The members of the board are officers of the state, therefore constitutional provisions which apply to officers apply to board members. Yes.
So going back to the prior page on your, it's Roman numeral 5, within 1 year of taking office, board members will complete an orientation program. I believe it's
It's a mandate.
yeah, it may be 6 months. I think it's actually 6 months, so that's something Wendy's got to check on.
Is that something new because it was 1 year?
Well, you take office January 1 and the orientation at the School Board Association is in February, but the makeup is June. It doesn't wait a whole year.
Right.
It doesn't wait till the next February. So that's something you're going to have to look, because I
Okay,
think we
all
should
right.
differ from what this, what
Okay.
our
All right, thanks.
requirement is.
Okay.
So we're changing within the 1 year and putting.
Let her
this-
look.
Let me find
it.
that.
See what that stands for. Correct.
Okay, Roman numeral 3, the board is responsible for the community it serves and represents. Therefore, it is the duty of the board to carry out the will of the community in matters of public education within the boundaries set by the laws and regulations of the state and the county, and policies of the board itself. There it is. That's the commitment to run the board via laws. Yes.
I need to add federal law as well, because we are governed by federal laws.
Okay,
I'll add that.
Beaufort County and the United States government. Okay, Robin? Okay, in order to fulfill its mission, the board will hold itself accountable for its, if I'm going too fast, stop me. In order to fulfill its mission, the board will hold itself accountable for its performance as follows. The board shall engage in board's development to assure continuous improvement in its capacity to govern effectively. Board members shall participate annually in professional development in accordance with South Carolina law. B, the board shall focus on strategic leadership rather than administrative details. The board will deal with administrative matters only through the superintendent and will not direct orders to the superintendent's subordinates either publicly or privately. The board will observe a clear distinction between the responsibilities of the board and the superintendent's delegated responsibilities. The board will give direction to the superintendent and his staff through majority decision of the full board rather than through individual decisions. It is understood that the members of the board have authority only when acting as a board legally in session. Unless so authorized by the board, no board member will individually speak for or in the name of the total board. The board shall not be bound in any way by any action or statement on the part of any individual board member, except when such statement or action is in pursuance of specific instruction from the board. Let's be clear that that does not prevent any member from saying whatever that member wants to, okay? All it's saying is that the board will not be bound by it. It does not specify what a board member cannot do or cannot say. Yes, Linda?
Yes, sir, under 59-1945, that statute says, within 1 year of taking office, all persons elected.
Could you speak up before?
Within 1 year of taking office, all persons elected or appointed as members of the school district board of trustees after July 1, 1997 shall complete successfully an orientation program in the college duty responsibilities within 1 year.
So is there a requirement for annual reassessment, as we've said here? Because that means everybody's going to go to the South Carolina School Board Association meeting. Got to do something here, the way it's written down, from what you just read. This should be under, this is what A was crossed out. Well, A, I guess it's A still, but it's still A. So it says that board members shall participate annually in professional development in accordance with South Carolina law.
Now, where are you right now? I was on,
So
I was in the one.
Oh, okay. I don't think A is referencing
Yes.
in the newbie introduction.
No, but it's saying you're gonna go back for more professional development. That's what it says. Every year you are.
Annually professional
According-
development, yeah.
This is part of your, that's part of your mission, to engage in continuous improvement.
Okay, yeah, I got you, and I'm looking for where the board commits to. Okay, I was looking at J, but J doesn't really apply.
Question is what category?
Well, okay,
What category?
I believe that
Professional
I
Yeah,
development.
think for the purposes of this, it's, the board members are offered various educational opportunities during the course of the year by the board, school board association and other organizations. So the policy, which is basically on it, it's an expectation that the members will avail themselves of some of the things that are offered to them. Okay, but we can't mandate.
And I'll go
Which-
through all the statutes, see if there's something in there, because this statute just about the first one. Yeah, yes, but there might be something else in here that I can find.
Okay.
Look, so I can find out.
Okay, F, board members individually will refer compliments, suggestions, and constructive criticism about operational matters directly to the superintendent for appropriate considerations and actions. Comments affecting policy will be routed through regular channels to the board meeting agenda for consideration by the board as a whole. Each school year, on or before March 15th, the board shall complete a self-evaluation assessment and participate in a special called meeting for the purpose of reviewing and discussing the results. It will be the responsibility of the chair to initiate this process and determine whether to use an outside facilitator for delivery and discussion of the results. The evaluation shall be a constructive tool for improving the board's performance and increasing the accountability of the public for the education of children and the stewardship of resources. The board recognizes that in order to be most effective in its governance role, it must continually monitor and evaluate its own performance processes and practices. The board believes that regular self-evaluation is essential to improving leadership, supporting student achievement, and attaining the district's vision, mission, guiding principles, and goals. The board shall evaluate itself as a whole during the self-evaluation process. The self-evaluation should emphasize areas of strength as well as those in it identified for improvement. Board members are also encouraged to use the evaluation process as an opportunity to assess their own personal performance. The board shall communicate frequently and regularly with the parents and the stakeholders of Beaufort County. Questions, requests, complaints, and other information presented to individual board members outside of a board meeting by members of the public shall be referred to the superintendent. Executive session meetings will be limited to only those matters allowed by South Carolina law. The board will govern and fulfill its commitments and will take action to prevent any officer, board member, or committee from hindering the board's performance or preventing the board from fulfilling its commitments. Now, I have a real concern about using the word prevent, because we cannot tell a person in advance what they can or cannot say. We cannot tell a person in advance what they can or cannot do. The board, the Attorney General's opinion as referenced, says that the most the board can do is issue a letter after the fact saying, gee, I wish you didn't do that. But the board is not authorized by the legislature to inflict punitive measures against a member for what a member does. And certainly not in advance. How would we say to prevent things?
I think so, I think so, I do agree with that.
I don't think that's what the policy is saying.
So, tell me what you
The policy is saying that once a board member does this, and it's gonna hinder the board from performing, then the board will take action.
Okay, can we,
What action?
Well, if you're gonna do something to prevent the board from operating, then I'm sure there's some recourse that the board can take if you're hindering to get anyone else.
No, sir.
If you're hindering.
No, sir.
The whole section was cut out. The board has no ability to enforce anything in here.
When we looked at it, I thought it was, board had no ability to reprimand.
nope,
But that's different. That's different when you're when you're hindering operation. You're hindering operation here. You're not doing anything wrong. You're hindering operation, which means it could be a number of things. I mean, just
But still,
stopping a meeting over and over and over and over. We can take action if somebody comes in every board meeting and interrupt the meeting and never goes on.
right, but once again, once again, the power the board has, there's no principle on the board. So when you say you take an action, what specify what type of action?
It doesn't say what kind of action. That's my point.
Right, but also, the board does not have the authority to take action. So the board doesn't have the authority to take action, so why should that be there? Because I mean, to my knowledge, the board does not have the authority.
Authority to reprimand an individual member, but it does have the authority to take action. The board, like any other entity, can take action, legal action.
So then it is.
Now, that was the whole essence of the discussion. We can express disapproval, but we can't take any action. The board has no ability to take any action. There's no ability to enforce any policy. You can't.
because we're elected officials, okay, we're not accountable to each other.
Right, and that's not.
Doesn't make sense.
But that's what
The Attorney General says, and that's what the law says.
Yeah.
I'm not disputing what you guys are talking about.
Logic, but
I'm just saying this is not saying that. I don't think it's saying
But that's
what
a
you're
fraud.
saying. happen. That's a different policy, we gonna get to that one too, I
Well,
suppose. We'll
The
get to
chair
that.
the chair has discretion under Robert's rules as the presiding officer to take care of somebody who's continually interrupting a meeting. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, if it hinders you from operating, period. I'm talking about Robert's rule. I'm talking about you just stopping this operation of a public entity. Then there can't be action taken. Now, I don't know, I'm not talking about the board specifically saying that there's action taken if you're disrupting. I mean, just basically, if you're disrupting any kind of public.
But let me ask you a question. I mean, I get what you're saying, but let me ask you, is there anything legally binding that gives us the power and the authority to do that? Because our policy, for every policy that we have, hold on, hear me out. Every policy we have, we related to say, based upon 1615 dash, this is what it states. If we're going to base it off of what the state says, or what the federal says, then once again, that's something we need to ask ourselves. Are we within our rights as well?
Okay, let me interject one thing, one at a time, okay? Because this is a complicated subject. I understand your point, Mel, but there's just no remedy other than exactly what David says. You know, you can tell a board can tell a person that they're disappointed in what they did, and that's about the size of it. Because we're not members that are picked by each other. We're members that are picked by the electorate.
I'm just saying, I mean, there is legal recourse. We can hire legal recourse when something is happening at the board level that we can't control individually. I mean, that just don't make sense that you're saying that the board can't take any action. Someone comes up and says, no meeting today, I'll put a gun on the board. No meeting.
That's criminal. Once again, that's criminal.
Another law.
Yeah, that's
Well,
criminal.
that's hindering. I don't know what's going on. That's just an extreme example to tell you, to say anything that you're hindering the board from doing. You can't hinder the board from doing this operation.
That's criminal mistake.
The way this is written is just far too open-ended.
Yes.
You know, because it's so subjective. What one person considers hindering may
That would
not,
be a legal recourse.
or may not.
That would be a legal
hindering by
recourse,
another.
that he gets away with it. But that would be, the board can take action. That would be legal, because that would be interpretation of the legal authorities to say he was disrupting or not disrupting. He was hindering the board or not hindering the board. She was, that would be the legal interpretation. We can take the action. That's what I think that's saying.
You'd be surprised, Mel. I found an attorney general's opinion that stated that the chair cannot even assign seating for members at a meeting. And that's
nothing.
you know,
That's
it's
nothing.
just, I understand where you're coming from, but we cannot place ourselves
Like when-
under the opinion of each other. Wendy?
I like when they go-
Yes, David.
Go ahead.
I would suggest perhaps that after "will take action," put a comma and say "within its powers, comma, to prevent any officer," because I don't think you're right, because I don't think we have the power to do it.
I don't think.
But within its powers,
I think,
and then we can argue about what's within its powers when it comes up.
well, that'll come up to the other policy, but I don't think it's only saying within the board's power. I mean, I think it's just saying the board will recognize interference in someone and then go to the right direction to get that corrected. I don't think it's the board's purview to do the correcting here. I think it's our purview to look for authority to do the correction. And when I say authority, I mean law enforcement and anything else.
So if law enforcement is doing correcting, why are we doing correcting?
We're not doing correcting, we didn't take an action. We just call a police officer and say, hey, last night the guy pulled a gun on the table and we couldn't operate.
Well, that was done in the past. Two people got into it, and someone threatened someone, and they called law enforcement. That actually happened. So then, when that happened, then they took the necessary.
They took the action,
Right,
they called the cops.
Right, and that
That's
was
what this is saying.
right, but that was handled, and there was nothing the board could do. None of the board members were
Nobody said the board would do anything, you're just saying that you would take action. That's the action that I'm talking about, they would take.
No, excuse me. We've got a note in here that Wendy was gonna review the statute, so will you tell us what you
So
found?
I think what I should do at this point is, there are a number of attorney general opinions out there. And then there is a statute that when we were doing this before, we didn't talk about it at all, it didn't even come up. There's a statute about that a board can remove a member after notice and an opportunity to be heard. In other words, there's that statute that we didn't know about when we were doing this before. So I tried to do this today, but didn't get to. But I will seek clarification on this issue so that so that we have clear direction from the Attorney General on what we should, what our limits are, what our scope is, what we can or we cannot do, and then we'll take all those different opinions,
Okay.
talk to the Attorney General, and then we'll have clear, and if you have any input or items that you want me to include, just let me know, because I did that before when we had.
When you do that,
Yeah.
will you reference what happened 2-3 weeks ago? When the chair of the county council wanted a member of the public evicted from the meeting, and the sheriff, who happened to be there, said, I'm not gonna do that because he didn't break any laws.
Okay.
Okay?
We're
The
talking
citizen's
about
name
board,
was.
not a public member, right? We're just talking about our reports, we're not about like.
Board to board.
Board members only? Okay.
Yeah, board to
But the point is, you gotta break the law.
Yes, perhaps.
All right.
But do we have, okay, now you're getting to my point.
Okay.
I mean, my
If we don't
point
like
is,
somebody's style, that's tough to handle.
right, that ain't the spirit here, that's not the spirit of that. The spirit is that we have the commitment to take action when somebody breaks the law.
Right, but at that time when they break the law, then I mean, 9 times out of 10, I've seen where a board member has been charged for breaking the law as in public disorderly conduct, and that she broke the law, disorderly
That
conduct.
kind of law, the law relative to
Right,
what
right.
we're doing.
But at the end of the day, she did that board member, that person did break the law because of the mere fact that they took that person to jail and they stopped that meeting for that. So therefore, it did have the same outcome that you're talking about. So therefore, there was the law stated at that time there was nothing done. That person is still a board member. So once again,
Do something to her, it says that we're going to take action. The action was taken.
All right. Can I make a
well,
suggestion?
why are we taking action? We have no order.
Will, excuse me. Can I make a suggestion? The board commits to honoring all local, state, and federal laws in the conducting of board business. Huh? Is that reasonable, folks? That would take out, you can write, the board will govern and fulfill its commitments, period. The board will honor and enforce all local, state, and federal statutes in the conduct of its business. What do you think?
We do a lot of things based on the Attorney General's opinion. So I'm not sure how that works into it, but yeah, I understand what Mel's saying. It took me a long time to catch up, but I finally do understand. If the action we're taking is to get an Attorney General opinion, then that's an action.
Yeah.
If the action is to call a police officer, that's an action. Doesn't mean that we're gonna do it. We're just gonna take an action to make sure something gets done.
Right.
I got that.
Yeah, but that's too
But
far.
that- yeah,
That's
Where do you read that?
that's not what it reads.
The only problem is that this is a policy, and unless Mel is there to explain to everybody what it means, they're not gonna catch on, so we gotta change the wording.
I'm not.
We gotta
All
change
right,
the
so
wording.
one more time, let's be clear. And the reason I focus on the Attorney General's opinions so much is that they are so thoroughly researched and loaded with case law. They don't just pull the stuff out of the air, they actually research it. Okay, the board will govern and fulfill its commitment, and also,
Now it's at you.
huh?
You had the board will govern and fulfill its commitment, period.
Right,
Then you said the board will honor,
and enforce.
You're on 10, the board will govern and fulfill its commitment,
period.
period, okay, the
The
board,
board will honor and enforce
the board,
All local, state, and federal statutes in the conduct of its business.
but we talk about that in, oh,
All right, and then that, everything else in that motion, in N is stricken.
The board will honor and enforce all local, state, and federal statutes in its,
Conduct of the board's business. Does that satisfy your,
but is,
No. That's
no,
an
we talk about that,
application
no.
responsibility.
I said enforce.
Well,
Because technically speaking,
that's what you don't, that's what you say you can't do.
No, enforce to me is calling the cops if we think it's warranted.
You know, right? And
Yeah, that-
taking
that-
action, the same thing.
no, that's two different things. Because now you personalize it. You're saying if that person breaks the law, then that with the state statute, it says you have the right, I'm sure, to go to cops. And really, as a person, anytime somebody breaks the law, you a person, you can call 911. It doesn't call for a board, the whole board to call 911. As a person, you can take action. That's your First Amendment right because of your safety.
I think,
I mean, that's just not, that's not.
all
I think-
they're related to the things that Oldham specifically might do under the disguise of the board that's illegal.
Well, and if it's illegal, then it would be within, as you say, within the local, state and federal policy. I mean, state law.
No, under the disguise of board authority. But you can, yeah, under the disguise of board authority. I'll give you an example. You dislike something that's happening at the district office, and you go in and just, assuming that you're the authority, put the person out or say that you're fired or say, well, you can't do that. Why can't you do it? You're right, you can't do it. The board would have to take action to correct that person.
Right.
Well, you know
And
that,
the action would be a vote saying he's off the board. The action would be that he did something wrong in terms of the authority of the board member, and you have to take action legally.
But that's how you see it, but that's not how.
That's how I see that's written. That's how, I mean, I don't know. They got, reviewed the state and attorney general opinion there. I mean, we never did that or we
no,
didn't.
there is one attorney general opinion that says one thing, and then other ones say other things, so you have a diverse group of opinions. So I just want to see clarification for you, also there's not any misunderstanding, and also because of that statute that talks about removing. It says you can remove a board member for cause, but you have to have notice and an opportunity to be heard, and they have to have due process and have a hearing before they can be removed from their office.
Right,
That's a statute, though.
Right, right.
That's
So-
what removing.
right, so if that's right,
Removing.
and if that's a statute, then that means that statute has a number, so that means that statute is law. So therefore, there's specifically from what his motion says, it says state, local, and state and federal law. That statute's under law. So therefore, that statute is covered because of the fact that that is an actual statute. So based upon this right here, this is a broad. It's not saying upon that because there's a legitimized statute. Then we go off the statute. When you go to court, you don't go off of personal feelings or emotions. You come in there and it's your job to show burden. No. But when you go to court, you don't go in there based off the feelings of what they think you've done. You go off in there based off a charge or a state or federal law that you've broken. And therefore, then you have to either the state show the burden that you broke the law, or you the solicitor show the burden that you broke the law. So therefore, It is legitimized right then. It's not based upon a wide variance of what's right here saying that's specific. You can't get no more specific than that. Either you broke the law or you didn't. Either you have the right to get rid of one. If the law then is a statute on it, then it doesn't go off of the Attorney General's personal opinion. It goes off of what the state statute is
Yes,
written.
and the
And then
state
hold on,
statute
I'm finish. And then after that, right, hold on. But after that, after you make that motion, you put the ball in motion, then you go to court, and then once again, then the Attorney General himself, along with the attorney, they have to, the state put the burden on them to present their case that what happened should be taken forward and should happen. That's the law.
I've been in line for a long time.
I just want to get in the queue.
All I want is, in this statute,
Right, that's what.
this is what it says, I mean, for everybody, I don't have it in front of me, but verbatim, but I know it says this. It says that the board may remove for cause, so we need to give a definition of what for cause means, because it doesn't say breaking a federal law, or, I mean, I think,
We're in that good time.
no, it's like say some things, like Dr. Batu.
If you're gonna get an opinion on it, please ask it in a way that separates appointed trustees from elected trustees,
Right, but we're,
okay? Because what you're talking about is nullifying an election, not removing somebody from the board, you're nullifying an election. And there is a statute that says only the governor can remove somebody from elected office. That's in contradiction to that.
and that's in the Constitution.
I'm sorry?
I think it's in the Constitution, isn't it?
Okay, well, that's even better.
I don't know, though. I need to read all 199 pages.
Okay.
Yes, don't have my hearing for
But now, let me just very quickly talk about you.
Come on, John.
Jesus
Let's go, shotgun.
So, I just want to support what Wendy's saying. So this, where you say this Attorney General's opinion, this is that February 2016 opinion, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you have there's totally different opinion per the attorney, Andrea White, and you've heard this, where she presented in public to you all the state law and statutes and whatnot that support, as Wendy has said, there is state statute for removal, but it's very specific. I mean, you can't, like Joanne said, you can't say, oh, I'm going to remove you, I don't want your tie. You have to, there's a whole process for removal. And her big thing with, I know from this opinion here, she doesn't think it's legally sound because it doesn't take into effect that law, that rule of 1970 that combined the two Beaufort County Board of Education. Pardon me? Okay, so back before 1970, there were two separate Beaufort County Board of Education. But in 1970, that law combined them as one, and they became Board of Trustees. And I know you keep arguing else, opposite, but you're going to get different opinions. So that's your opinion, John Dowling's opinion, but there's other legal opinions, and that's the opinion we need is legal opinions.
Yes.
And I think the legal opinion supports Mel's point.
Disagree.
Okay, fine.
Lawyers will come in, because lawyers know the board salivate at the idea of being able to throw somebody off the board when they disagree. I'm not it's been tried here.
A good example, maybe what if somebody arrived drunk every single meeting? That's not against the law, but is that wouldn't that be problematic? Just, lay out in the chair, every single meeting, that's a problem. So, but the way you changed it, there's nothing about, this is conduct of board business, there's nothing, that is taken out, there's certain situations that you have to consider, but yes, it should be according to state statute, it shouldn't be.
Yes, there's a statute against public drunkenness.
Right, but what do you do? Don't you take that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Orshak has the floor.
Yes.
The electorate employs the board. They're our boss, the electorate, okay? So with that in mind, laws aside, you are going to inflame the electorate that voted for each and every one of you, want you in there. You're going to inflame them as a board if you try to take their representative out. That's aside from the law. That's the political piece. And you're going to have a heck of a problem with that. So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's very problematic. It may be doable by law, but you're going to face other consequences that won't work well. Okay? So.
I'm just gonna say, I understand that you are going to ask the Attorney General to update their opinion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because if you don't do that, when we have the first reading, I'm gonna make the motion to do that and get an updated opinion, so.
But I think you all need that updated opinion.
I
so
agree.
you can make a
I agree.
decision.
I agree. So,
Yeah.
just kind of get the updated opinion, and then we'll all agree to go with that opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Because all lawyers give you opinions, only judges, you know this.
right, judges.
And I just
Lawyer
want to
only
make sure
gives
we
you an
do this
opinion.
right. We're doing the right thing.
As Jerry Lewis said, I can get an attorney to break the contract that he broke.
Okay, let me ask a question, make a comment.
Yes,
We've been sitting there talking about the law, and it seemed like everybody's worried about criminal activity. But my concern is this, if a board member comes in and is keeping the board from doing what they're supposed to do at a meeting, then there has to be some remedy to that. You know, the chair can pull you off a committee or whatever, you know, because you can't let somebody do whatever they want to do and handle the board from doing their job.
Mr. Campbell, you've been on the board the longest.
Yeah.
Give us, you don't have to name names, but tell us a scenario where you had a board member that was so disrupted that intervention was necessary. And be frank with us.
In fact, we had two board members who was very, one of them was my cousin.
Just
And the other one was an ex-principal.
What's the truth?
And they told the chair, we're not going to listen to you, we're going to do what we wanted to do. And so what the chair didn't sign them in the committees. And that's what they did, what they did, you know. But, you know, board members cannot come on the board and do whatever they want to do or say whatever they want to say. I understand people saying, well, you don't have that right to tell somebody what they can say. But we are here to set an example for students. They watch us, how we behave and how we act. And if you cannot do that, then you don't have a good son of the board. We've had board members that got drunk, but you can do about it, you know. If the board tried to, but you couldn't do nothing about it, you know. But, you know, if you're gonna hinder the board from doing their job, then there has to be some type of remedy.
Nell, then,
Because, I mean, I'm thinking there could be a point in the agenda to keep the board from moving on. I mean, I could come in every board meeting and stop us from having anything done. As long as I'm getting the order that the respect that I'm supposed to get, I could filibuster for half of the board meeting about nothing. But the point is, the board have the power to do something about it, not to do something directly to me, but to do something to get action happening against that. That's my point. And your point about the electorate, well, even the electorate, if that board member is stopping the agenda from happening, then the electorate's not gonna be happy either.
Well, let me ask this, and John referenced it about Robert's rules. there's a good deal of authority that's given to the chairperson to conduct the meeting and manage that type of thing, okay? And so I guess, you know, we need to look at that piece too. If you have a board member that fits the description that you're talking about and Earl's talking about, you know, the full authority is on the chair who's running the meeting. It's not an easy job. That's a difficult one, but, you know, and I don't know the strategies that would be employed. I don't know. Mr. Campbell, you were chair for a long time. You know, you probably had to get a board member or two under control based on
So
A, B, or
I've
C.
never had a problem with board members.
Yeah,
The time I chaired 4 times,
okay.
and I never had,
Okay,
you know,
that's good.
I've never had a problem.
So, you know, I would say,
You know, I think that the chair, one thing about the chair, you cannot let anybody bully you as a chair. And that's something I did not have. You know, you may have some disagreements with me. You fine, that's, criticism doesn't hurt me. You know, because I made a good job, and I don't apologize for any decision I've made since I've been on this board. Because I know I benefit not only my community, but this whole county. You know, because I'm concerned about education. And that's just me, you know.
I think we're talking about 2 things here. Conduct of meetings, out of meeting conduct, because you said, you used an example of losing it, telling a person they're fired. Well, despite the fact that that violates about 9 social norms and 3 protocols, it's not illegal. And so therefore, the board cannot do anything about that except pass a little blurb that says, we wish you didn't do that.
And if
Now,
the person
if-
walks out from a job,
Outside of the meeting. Inside the meeting, the chair has full authority to do whatever the chair requires. So let's look at it logically. A person comes in after having a couple, starts getting argumentative, prevents discussion from going on, okay? The chair says, you're out of order, I want you to be quiet. The person says,
yeah.
okay, I'm not gonna be quiet, then the chair can call 911,
That's
or
actually-
signal to the deputy that
That's
would make
actually-
$45 a night.
yeah.
That's action that she has authority to.
Right.
That's
But
what
we
that's
can't-
talking
But
about.
we can't word the
But that's common
policy.
sense action.
We can't, wait a minute, Will, please. We can't word, I don't think we can word the policy in a way that allows us to use subjective criteria for deciding whether or not somebody is hindering the board's performance.
That's where the law comes in. Are you gonna take an
Okay,
action?
so what is wrong
The law's
with
gonna
saying
address
that the board will, I'm not attacking your position, I'm just trying to fully develop the conversation around it, because,
I agree, I'm not looking at it that way, I'm just.
all right.
Yeah.
So, well, a vote is unnecessary because
Well, I have something to add to
Wendy
that,
has to
too.
review, what?
I had some, I want that comment too on that before you move on.
Okay, last comment.
Okay. Well, my comment on that too is that I remember coming to board members and certain board members, after certain times, at certain point meetings, somebody took them out, they would get up and they would walk out. And certain board members probably made comments about that, and it was nothing that the board could do, and the board couldn't take no action, because that person was an elected official, and once again, that's up to the people who vote them in office, to vote them out of office, or to do what they want to do. So the board members couldn't do nothing. After a certain amount of time, the person would say something, however they feel, and they say, you know what, they grab their stuff, and they pack up, and they walk out. And it was,
Turns the lights.
that's-
oh, no, and right, and it was nothing, and it was no action that the board could take upon that. So that's why, once again, I go back to my primary thing, to the motion that John made. Regardless of whether we like it or not, if someone is out here right now and there's a stop sign, if we see them, if we see a board member, we see another board member shoot and hit the stop sign, listen, yeah, they may have, but there's nothing we can do because it's not in our purviews. So, with that being said, we don't have the authority to be the police here. The authority is on the state not board members policing other board members. That's not within our purview, because I would specifically say I will go within state, federal, local statute, not upon based off the feeling or emotion off of someone else. That's all I'm saying. I'm done with that.
Can I simplify just one simple point? As board members, all this is saying in my mind, as board members, if we see one breaking a board member, breaking a rule or law of the state, the county, the land, we're obligated to take action. We're obligated to do something about it.
Didn't they?
As opposed to, if you're a private citizen, you might not ignore it. But if we see something that the board member is doing to hinder the work of the board in terms of the whole kit and caboodle, the whole $250 million budget, if we got someone who is hindering that from happening and it's not legal, our job is to do something about it.
In the past.
Take action ourselves about it. I mean,
In the past.
that's all it's saying.
I got what you said, but in the past, when that had happened, I do remember, and like what John Don said, I do remember, and I think they said, I think it was maybe a female chairman, when she didn't like something that another board member did. I do remember, oh, no,
I'm breaking the law.
right, hold on, but not didn't like, they thought that the chairman, as the chairman, the person might have been out of order, and they wrote him a letter, and basically, I believe that was all that they could, that could have been done, because that was what was really within the power of the authority of an actual board. So once again, I mean, that's just to say.
That's a different
No,
law.
no.
We got that one covered that you're talking about. That one's covered in there.
No, but this
We're
one,
gonna get to that one.
this right here is very broad, and it does not state what we said, but I know we're gonna move on to the state attorney general. I'll let that go with that.
We can move over the wording for tonight because
Okay, and,
Yes.
we need to get,
the word
well, here we go. The board will govern legally
and what is,
ensure that its actions are consistent with local, state, federal laws and with the board's policies. Pursuant to South Carolina Code, the board shall manage and control the educational interests of the district with the exclusive authority to operate or not to operate any public school or schools. No school in the district shall be operated or not operated without prior approval of the board.
board members,
With your permission, I'm going to spend the time of the meeting. Mel?
I agree.
Board policies. The board shall be,
John.
I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure, Mr. Dowling, and for all your benefits, that under 59-1990, if you all want those policies, in your policies, do you want that statute cited? Because here, you're citing it with respect to operating or not operating any public school or schools. But you have other statutory authorities. Do you want those listed in your policies? Because we've got to reference our ARs with all policies. So establishing an annual calendar that we were talking about yesterday. I mean, do you all want to have a policy that says the board has the authority to establish an annual calendar for students, faculty, and staff to include starting dates, ending dates, holidays, make-up days, and service days, professional development days? You all do that, but it's not in your policy. So I just want to make sure that we include everything that you have authority to do. Yes, please.
Okay.
Well,
Oh, no, I think that's a good point, because I do think actually the annual calendar, for example, is in 3.3.
It is in 3.3, oh, good, okay. But the other ones, like charge matriculation and incidental and,
Can I go back up to 2.2, Roman numeral 2? It said the board's powers are derived from the state constitution and acts of the General Assembly. Consequently, the board may only perform those acts for which some authority exists. The authority may be expressly stated or implied either in state law or in rules and regulations of the State Board of Education. The members of the board are officers of the state, therefore constitutional provisions which apply to officers apply to board members. To me, that states that if it's a law, we'll follow it. So do we have to republish everything that's in chapter 59?
No, I just talked about general powers and duties of school trustees, and the reason I bring it up to you is because I know from other professional colleagues that they're just supposed to do that, but it's whatever the, it's
But
very.
I would think that if Roman numeral number 4 does not state all the things that the board shall manage and control, we still can manage and control them because we're authorized by another statute to do it.
Even in 4, I think we're
Yeah, so bring
authorized.
it up.
Huh?
Even in Roman numeral 4, I think we're authorized. You know, I mean, when it says you're authorized to operate, then that covers a lot of territory. You can't write everything in that
Right.
you're gonna do and operate.
Okay. The board considers policy development one of its chief functions. The board will develop written policies to serve as expectations for its own operations and for the successful and efficient functioning of the public schools. Written policies are expectations for the discretionary action of those to whom the board delegates authority and are a source of information to all those who are interested in and affected by the schools within the county school district. Proposals regarding policies may originate with a member of the board, the superintendent, a staff member, or stakeholder, and be presented in writing and given to the board. Upon receipt, the board will use a careful and orderly process in examining proposals prior to action upon them by the board. The board will continually study and evaluate the written policies and the reports concerning the execution of its written policies to determine the adequacy and effectiveness of those policies. Changes in needs, conditions, purposes, and objectives will require revisions, deletions, and additions to the policies of present and future boards. Each proposed policy, including proposals to amend policy, will require 2 readings at regular meetings or work sessions of the board. The formal adoption of the policies will be recorded in the minutes of the board. Only those written statements so adopted and so recorded will be regarded as official board policy. Now, the number 2 readings is from the State School Board Association. Our current policy is 3. What do you think?
I would say move it to 2 if that's the
2?
recommendation. I mean, why would you need more than what's recommended? I
Anyone else?
But I'm not committed.
mean, you can talk about it.
Say, I can talk.
We'll vote after you talk.
Well, the only thing I'll say is I really don't know which number that I'd like, but the multiple readings process is to allow members of the board to interject and request changes. Then you have to discuss the whole thing all over again anyway. So, I don't know, help me with the history. Did many policies change between the second and third reading and passed?
Unfortunately, yes.
Policies always change on the last reading, whether it's the second.
Whether it's the
third.
second or third?
Or the 4th, you can have 4, but still wait till the last
Okay.
meeting. Same reason the post office has long lines on April
Christmas.
15th.
So if the changes in the last reading, does it go back to the first reading, or is it adopted the way that people are proposing it?
And adopts it, whatever the final reading is.
Okay, all right. So I support 2.
That's right.
All right. In emergency situations, a majority of the board members present at a regular or special meeting may temporarily suspend the operation of any sections or sections of board policy which are not established by law or contract. A proposal for such change must be listed on the agenda of the meeting. All board members must be notified in writing of a meeting to discuss policy changes. A policy may be suspended or waived by a 2/3 vote of the board membership. That's pretty much what Robert's rules will let you do as well. Okay? But it can't be done on the fly. Okay? Anybody got that? I mean,
What's that comment mean?
in the middle of the meeting, you can't decide that you want to suspend the rules or change the policy or anything. It's got, a proposal for such change must be listed on the agenda, and all board members must be notified in writing of the meeting to discuss policy changes. Now, you do have an avenue. If something has to be done right away, a policy may be suspended or waived by a 2/3 vote of the board's membership. Okay? The board may also suspend a policy, although such change was not listed on the agenda of the meeting, if the favorable vote is unanimous and otherwise comports with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. I would assume that the FOIA involvement there would be, is it to deal with an emergency or an exigent situation, not necessarily because you want to avoid another meeting next week. Okay? School board meetings, purpose, the board commits to holding meetings that are conducted with maximum effectiveness and efficiency. All board meetings will be conducted in accordance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. All board meetings, except for periods in which the board is in executive session, shall be open to the public. Unless a procedure, process, or rule is otherwise explicitly provided in the board's policies governing its operations and procedures, the boards may utilize Robert's Rules of Order procedure in small boards as an advice guide for the conduct of official meetings. Regular board meetings. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna point out, your thing about exigent circumstances, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. It says you can suspend policy by unanimous vote. Doesn't mention anything about exigent circumstances or anything.
Yeah,
So
but
if
it's
you-
got to
if you
comport
think
with
that
the
that's-
South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, which does require an emergency or exigent
To
circumstance.
suspend a policy?
Huh?
To, the
To
FOIA,
do anything at a meeting that's not on the agenda in advance, you've got to have an emergency or an exigent situation.
including suspending policy?
Huh?
Including suspending a policy?
Okay, all right, you'd have to show that suspending that policy is an emergency, not a convenience. That's all. Regular board meetings. The board will normally hold its regular meetings on the first and third Tuesdays. The board will annually approve a calendar of board meetings normally in its final work session of the preceding year. The scheduled meetings will be sent to local news media. Regular board meetings will normally, I don't think it's a good idea to say that executive sessions are the norm. Okay, I think that we should say the public meetings begin at 6 p.m. If necessary, executive sessions will be held at a time determined by the board. We've been doing our executive sessions at 4:30 lately, and this policy assumes that there'll be executive sessions. And in the period April 16 to April 17, the board met 29 times and went into executive session 26 of them.
And the first sentence there, we having a meeting, we didn't have 2 meetings each month now.
July and December, you
Just
had,
in calendar, school calendar, or?
not school calendar, but regular calendar. The month of July and the month of December, you have 1 meetings. You have 1 scheduled meeting.
Right, so,
Because boards previously had decided that in the summertime you were doing 1 meeting, and in December you had decided that you only needed to meet 1 time.
I
Now you
understand,
get-
so we need to put that in policy then.
No, because it says normally hold its regular meetings. That leaves you an out.
Well, yeah, but I don't know, see, again, that's language is not
Well,
can
yeah,
take
we-
that out now.
We could put, the board will normally hold its regular meetings on the first and third Tuesday of each calendar month, except at the board's discretion.
Yeah, because normally, just in my mind, if I'm reading that, I think normally it's first and third Tuesday.
Well, that's what it is normally.
Yeah, but each calendar month becomes, becomes every month. Normally isn't
Okay,
an
suggestion.
adjective
All
for
right.
the month.
Why don't you give me a suggestion?
So then, as to you, what you were saying,
Yeah,
as
we're
the
going
board,
to
as the
add
board
what you
discretion,
added to it.
as to the board's discretion.
Yeah.
That's what you said, the verbiage that you said a minute ago.
Okay, the board will normally hold its regular meetings on the first and third Tuesday of each calendar month,
So,
except at the board's, no, why don't we put a period after month, and it goes, this schedule may be changed at the board's discretion. Yes,
Question. Are committee updates only permitted on the agenda if the committee has met prior to that meeting?
there's no policy around that.
Okay. Is that something the policy committee has looked at? In other words, let's say the finance committee hasn't met for a whole month, but I might have an update for the board. As it stands right now, that's prohibited. We're not permitted to bring an update. So I didn't know if the committee had,
prohibited at the agenda, so
When we get to the committee,
there's no, there's no
sounds
rule
good.
either way.
Can I get clarification? Can I get clarification?
Yeah.
The board will normally hold its regular meetings on the first and third Tuesday of each calendar month, period. This schedule may be changed at the board's discretion.
Yeah.
And are we deleting everything else afterwards?
Oh,
or
no,
what
I
are we-
haven't got that far
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Okay. I would suggest that after that red sentence, that we have regular board meetings will normally begin at 6 p.m. Executive sessions will be held as needed and scheduled by the board.
It's scheduled by,
Locations. What are the locations?
the board doesn't schedule an executive session time though.
Yeah.
It doesn't?
No, we don't come and ask the board what time do you want to start executive session. The officers do that.
That's,
We-
let's say it's fine, that's delegated to them.
Executive sessions will be held as needed and scheduled by,
The board officers, it's probably good, it'd be that way.
I was just saying, because you have board officers and other things when you talk about,
Okay, yes,
I think you want to leave public meetings so the public is crystal clear to them, and that's when at 6 o'clock. So if you just say regular board meetings will normally begin at 6 p.m., they may not know that that's the public
Okay,
session. They
yeah.
may think that's the executive session.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I don't think it's necessary to have a location fixed in policy.
correct.
Huh?
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to, this is about where it's gonna be.
David and Christie.
I agree with the exact location. We just want one north and one south of the broad. I think that's the intent. You're not gonna have all north or all south. You're gonna have and then one north and one south.
Alternating north and south of the Broad.
So that, yeah, I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take the intent. Yes.
But the problem is you say, I agree, I was just gonna say the same thing, David, but if you say alternating north and south of the road, then you're gonna get onto the first meeting of the month, once you have July, where you only have one meeting.
And the next one is also not the,
That's not the way it's reserved. It's
Can you make
reserved,
something more general?
so I think
Maybe
you,
the first
why-
meeting, one location.
yeah,
and
I
then
think, why not put it there? I mean, I think the
I
better, the more
sense it's
specific we
probably-
can be for people, the better.
how about if
Something
the
like that.
regular board meetings will alternate between
Get
the
into
month?
this like right up on the fine.
No, because that's not gonna be correct once you get July or
Well,
December.
what would you,
Well, that's assuming that, that's, wait a minute.
Round and
No,
go.
wait a minute.
Just why not just do what we do, because we have the county council chambers the first Tuesday.
but
So
that's-
put it in there.
But that's assuming that if you alternate them, you take away the requirement for first and third. So if you had your one meeting in July at North of Broad, the next meeting would be South of Broad, even though it's the first meeting of the month, because there's nothing in stone here that says we have to have the first meeting of the month North of Broad.
That's a problem, because county council is reserved for us the first Tuesday of the month.
It's all the reservations.
But you can't get it.
I mean, we could change it, but the other thing is, if you don't necessarily have a place like a Hilton, the summer, Hilton Head Library was not available. So we had to go to the district office. So I don't know if you want to be that specific, because if the location is not available, the libraries weren't available for us during the summertime because of the summer reading programs. So we don't necessarily have that option all the time in the summer.
So just say you're gonna roughly split the meetings 50-50 between
Well,
north and south. I mean, just make it
equal
more general.
access.
Yeah.
well, what I would,
But I would start saying you're gonna alternate.
But basically, what I was gonna say, the same way how we do that policy, said basically, that the meetings are normally, north and south, but it's the board discretion. So that way, if we run into what Robin was talking about, then we say that it's to the board discretion. So basically, there's wiggle room, so that we don't, if it's not north, or it's like what you said, then that way, if it is at the board discretion, then you got the wiggle room there.
That's a good, David?
So that's what I was gonna say.
I was just gonna say, change it to say the intent of the board is to have an equal.
Okay, well, how about board members, board meetings will be equally distributed between north and south?
Approximately equally distributed, so you know.
Where does that
Don't get into, oh, we had 15 here and we had only.
Yeah, right. Don't get into those.
That's what intent.
That's what the intent.
Yeah, the intent,
Yeah.
Smooth it
we
out.
did come on that intent, so that's good.
All right.
And I just said that because sometimes we have executive call meetings and stuff, I mean, emergency, we call meetings, so
Yes.
that way people say, well, your board policy said, the next meeting is gonna be over here, and we had an district office. So that's why I said to the board's discretion.
I know, Mel and I, we travel most times north of the Broad, I mean, that's the nature of the beast, but it is what it is, at least we're trying
Yeah.
to, I wonder if, would our committees consider doing what the finance committees doing? One north, one south, it's working well. Is that anything the policy committee has looked at? Alternating
We discussed alternating, and it was gonna be based on the public's desire to attend. Okay?
Gotcha.
And when we only had one meeting,
Yes.
when a member of the public showed up,
Yeah.
we decided it didn't make too much difference
No, I know.
in having it here, since all three committee members would live south of the road.
Yes, and I say thanks to Robin, it's going smooth, because she's arranging the Hilton Library, like clockwork, so that works for us. And that his finance meeting is very well attended, so, yeah.
Yeah, we're not exactly.
I know,
A
people are
draw.
trying to listen to policy development.
Who else could want a system
Yeah,
like this?
I gotcha.
All right, all right, work session, okay, so we're gonna take all those location stuff.
We're gonna say north of the.
Work sessions, the board will hold quarterly work sessions, although action may be taken, and it is, the purpose of the work sessions is to allow board opportunities for planning and discussion without formal action. Topics to be discussed will be announced publicly and sessions will be conducted in accordance with South Carolina law. Special call and emergency meetings of the board may be convened in accordance with South Carolina law. Board member expectations at board meetings. Board members shall be adequately prepared, having read materials provided to board members in advance of each meeting, including all minutes. A board member requesting a collection of amendments to minutes of a previous meeting should notify the board secretary prior to the meeting at which the board is scheduled to approve such minutes. Now, I would like to make two suggestions. Number one, at board meetings, board members are encouraged to be adequately prepared. Okay? Number two, we gotta settle this. I can't read, and I'm retired, and I can't read everything when it's delivered at 11 o'clock in the morning of a board meeting, and that has nothing to do with you. That is not your fault, and I want the record saying that, okay? You put it on and get it, all right?
So that's why we staff. I saw an email.
On April 17th, the board passed a motion that Robin would have materials for board meeting 11 days before the meeting. Now, that has not been rescinded, okay? I think 11 days is a little much myself. However, the point is, every conversation I've ever had with anybody else on the board, they get this stuff at least a week, and in a lot of cases, 2 weeks in advance. You've had those conversations as well, okay? Somebody else's lack of planning is not our emergency. Go ahead.
So I spoke with staff this morning, all right, and put a system in place for us to get materials to, I think the request that I heard recently was the Thursday before the board meeting. That was what I had heard. Is that right?
That's what it is. That's what it is.
So to get the materials the Thursday before the board meeting. Now, the only thing I want to add to that is if you get the materials on Thursday, and then you have a follow-up question for staff, that's going to require them to go back and do some work, and then get stuff back to you, right? That's okay, that's their job to go do it, but I just, to be fair, that's a situation that could happen, because you might get a question after you look at the materials, right? And if that's the case, I just want us all to be, have this conversation that we get it material for Thursday before the board meeting, and then if there's follow-up questions, there just has to be leeway for staff to get that done, which gives them Friday, we'll work through, but
And if we don't get it on until Saturday, I wait till the meeting.
so that's just the only thing. Go ahead, Bob.
So when you get follow-up, I'm not copied on the board questions or whatever. So I'm using it. Joanne asked for a follow-up, and she doesn't send it to all the board members. Tanya provides a follow-up on Monday. I put the information in board docs, but the rest of the board might not know that that's Joanne's follow-up to her question. So is everyone copied on the follow-up questions? To know that if Tanya or if Robert put something in, if I put information in on Monday, that information is put in as a follow-up to whoever asked the question. It's not just coming in at the last minute. That information is provided as a follow-up. So there needs to be a way to know that this is a follow-up question to a board member's request and not just a
Maybe
staff
in board
member.
docs, you're right, there's no way for the others to see why that is additional piece. They may not know to go back and get it. Is that?
Well, when I put anything in board docs, update, I send an email out saying I have updated board docs and I put in. But what I'm saying is they might not know that the information that I'm updating it is to a follow-up question or additional information that a board member has asked, because that information has not been communicated with all board members. It could be something that Joanne saw and she wants additional information. So staff is giving me the information and said, here, go ahead and put this in board docs. as a follow-up to some anticipated questions or conversations or emails that they have seen, they would say, go ahead, would you put this additional information in? And so I do email board members to say, updated board docs, but that's not because it's last minute information. It's follow-up questions or follow-up information to something that a board member, and it's not been communicated to every board member.
I'd like to urge caution about one facet of that taking place, okay? If a member has a follow-up question on some documentation they received, and they copy the board on their question, and then the staff member responds and copies the boards, that's really walking the line on the Freedom of Information Act. Okay, because you're really conducting the discussion away from the public meeting. It might be just as prudent to, we get the stuff Thursday, if we have questions, we write them down, we ask them at the meeting, in public.
So, for expediency, right, I mean, I think if there's questions that require staff to look in and follow up a little more, they, to be fair, they should be able to do that to get you the
can't expect an
information.
answer all the time, I agree that, but it's up to you to be the judge of that person's response to say, to think, A, whether they should have known it to answer it, or B, whether the, I'll get back to you on that, is warranted. That's your job as a boss. We'll accept whatever.
Yeah, I understand, I want you to conduct business too, you know, that's all. So, if you,
Because again, just, and it's selfish, I guess it's selfish on my part, but I can't be dealing with Saturday, Sunday, and Monday,
no,
reading stuff, and I'm gonna have to make a decision on Tuesday, that's, okay, yes.
But you also, I mean, if you don't allow some of that questioning in advance, the whole meeting is questions.
Right.
And there's zero business.
We're supposed to do the business of the public in public.
Yes, but I'm saying he's supplying, or through our superintendent and his staff, they're supplying the necessary documents to do business. So if you're preventing them from doing that, don't do that. We're gonna ask all these questions in public, and then we're gonna supply more documents, I mean.
All right.
that's what I'm saying, but I think
Yeah.
I also, you know, I just think it's important for us to be able to be and be perceived as professional as possible and as effective as possible, right? And so, no, we're not always gonna have every answer, and we're not gonna always, you know, I agree with that, you know? I'm just saying that if we know, and it's been my experience in other districts, that when there's a question, staff gets the question and we work the problem, right? We work it so that when we get there, right, the board can conduct business. And we're not always saying, all right, I'll get back to you for the next board. In the same way that I want to be able to run and move the district, you know, I think you do too. That's all.
I think I could try to make it easier on the staff member, right? How about we get the stuff Thursday, right? We come up with a question. We could write you saying, can you have somebody be prepared to answer the following question on Tuesday? That gives them 4 days to come up with an answer, but it relieves us the responsibility of checking our inbox every 2 hours to see if we got, over the weekend, to see if we got an answer.
Just a thought. I haven't been here long, but I've been to one board meeting. Right? And one question prompted another question, prompted another
Sure.
question, prompted another question, right?
That's the nature of public discussion.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if we can be as prepared as possible to get to, and you as prepared as possible with the information you're seeking, right? A lot of things might go through on consent agenda that don't need to have necessarily, right? You know, because your answers you might have been satisfied with the answer you got from staff, for example.
All right,
I don't know, I'm just throwing that out, you know?
yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
For the big money decisions, we better have all
Yeah.
the info well in advance. Consent agenda, that's one of my favorite topics. That can be minutes, low priority. We used to use consent agenda for big time contracts. You wouldn't believe how consent agenda used to be. It may even still be a policy. Anything unanimously voted out of a committee went directly to consent, no matter the magnitude. Now, that's an extreme scenario. Oh, for me, the big money votes, I think be well prepared. Or the only risk to me is either a no vote or an abstention. That's it, and I think you want full
And
support on those fronts.
I think if there's a, you know, a big ticket item, I
You
mean.
did,
Report it on.
yes,
I mean, you
yes,
are gonna ask questions.
yes,
You should, right?
yes.
You know?
We had a lot of questions at our last board meeting. Some might say it went on too long, but it pertained to big money issues. And a lot of those questions were for transparency for the public. Sometimes it's not only the board members' purposes that they're asking a question. It's to reveal information to those who are watching. And that may get out of hand, I see what you're saying, but, you know, the rest of it, I mean, we check board docs periodically throughout the weekend. The day of, you know, we certainly need a heads up if it's the day of and something went into board doc. And you've been doing that.
I send an
Thank
email
you.
anytime that something is sent to me, and I
Yes.
send an email out to board members and say, board doc says it has been updated.
Yes.
Everybody knows. So,
Yeah.
but we're setting the agenda today.
Yes.
So we go back to staff tomorrow, that's Tuesday. Staff is gonna get information on Tuesday and Wednesday to prepare. It's easy this time because we don't really have anything where well, you understand what I'm saying. But during school time and board business,
Yes.
then you're saying they get 2 days of preparing documents to get to me on Thursday evening. Then you all may not look at it Thursday, and then some of you, because I can tell when you all look at your emails or when things go through, a lot of you don't look at your things until Sunday and Monday.
Okay.
And so then you're saying you're gonna ask the superintendent, you're gonna bring your questions on Monday, or Saturday or Sunday when you look at it. So the staff is not looking at their emails on Saturday and Sunday to prepare documents to get to you on Monday, so they don't get them until Monday afternoon.
And as we think about this, we might be thinking about it in terms of one question for HR, one question for finance, one question for academic, but it could be that on the agenda we have 4 finance items, right? And that person's gotta prepare for 4 things in 2 days and then be able to respond to you.
And have committee meeting the next
So
day.
is our time frame big enough between agenda setting and meeting? Should we be backing it up? Is that something we need to look at? I don't know.
Yeah,
That and committees, because all of you all are on committees, and so staff is preparing stuff for committee. We have a committee meeting tomorrow, and we have a committee meeting on Wednesday. So staff is preparing, you know, and yes,
we're sandwiching it all together, too much together.
And
Let me ask you a
here's the
question.
thing, right? And truthfully, right? I know this about them in a short time. They want to be successful, right? And they want to be
Nobody's saying they
successful.
don't.
No, I know. I'm saying they want to be successful. They want to be successful in my eyes. They want to be successful in your eyes, and they want to be successful in the public's eye, right?
Mostly here.
Okay, but still, no, I'll be honest. I'll be honest. They worry. Believe me, and in the short time, I know for a fact, they worry about, you know, how you see it. They worry.
X amount of each agenda is spelled out a year in advance in the work plan. Staff should not be that surprised when Tuesday or Wednesday learn what's going to be in the next week's meeting, okay? They should be enough ahead of the game where they can, I think they should be enough ahead of the game where they can do that. If we did that and backed up the agenda set
Yeah.
to give more time, okay? But again, I have little sympathy for anybody who feels surprised that they gotta give a report on something that's been sitting in the work plan for 6 months.
Yeah, and here, can I compound the
John,
the
that's not on
complex
this
issue?
agenda.
No, but let me compound the complex issue. And I'm not trying to be difficult, I just want them to be successful, because I want to be successful, because I want you to be successful, and I want our district in the eyes of the public to be successful. So let me compound it for a second. They're not just preparing for this board meeting's agenda. Guys, they are preparing to respond to all the public information requests that we've been throwing at them from way back here. So they got that plus this.
And they're right on
You know,
job.
And not just, and the public, which they have a right to do, request things of them, you know? And they have to respond to that. There's a huge volume, right? And so it's not just about being prepared for what's coming up, you know what I mean? Just to be fair, I think we have to look at it in context, that it's more than just, they need to be ready for this, right? It's a big picture.
So we have to back up the agenda setting.
We average 6.5 FOIA requests a month. That's not onerous, okay? We get maybe 4 or 5 other requests, primarily around the transparency report, that could be answered by a clerk, not by the CFO. Okay.
But their requests are not FOIA requests either. They're requests that they have to respond to, right, that are not FOIA requests. So it does, I mean, I see it, guys, I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. I see it. They spend 80% of the time in the rearview mirror dealing with these requests that they get all the time, okay? And I'm not saying they should get any requests. There's a reason why they do right. But I'm just saying, I want you to understand, they spend 80% of the time doing this. And I need the reverse. I need 80% of the time run forward and 20% of the time take care of these other things. That's all I'm saying.
Then what I would suggest is this, is that first of all, I take an offense when somebody says it's not a regular job to give us information. Okay.
Well, I think
That's
it
really
is, Judge. I think it's our job to provide you with it so you can make good decisions.
But number 2, I would think that the type of questions we're asking are very, very easy to answer. Like, can I have the invoices for X firm for the last 2 years? How long does that take? Okay? The type of requests are not major products. They're not moonshots. And the amount of work, I believe, that they have to do to get the information that we're asking tells me that they are horribly set up wrong, okay? That they're either grossly inefficient or that they have no IT support whatsoever to be able to ask and answer a question quickly.
I would tell you that what I'm, in a short time, that what I'm assessing, right, is that there are some things that we can fix and some systems we can fix, internal systems to get work done better, get better faster and more efficient. Okay? However, okay, the amount of time we're going to do and right, they also suffer, okay, from the history. Okay? And they want to be successful in the eyes, not just mine, but in the eyes of the board. And they look at everything, you know, and they're not operating as confidently as I want them to operate because they're afraid, right, that they're gonna get hammered by
I'm not trying to beat you up.
No, I don't know. It's a good conversation. This is a good conversation, but I want you to know what I'm seeing as somebody who just got here.
Is the public asking them more to look in the rearview mirror or the board?
Both, to be fair.
So, for of the past. And
Same,
not necessarily.
same type of things that a few members are asking.
Something perceived as the might actually pertain to the president. For example, I have a FOIA request. I one has ever been able to produce a document detailing that. It's, yes, it may have been established in the past, but I needed to evaluate the present, okay? I needed, she is the board's bond counsel. She advises us, and our hands go up or stay down.
Yeah.
And that maybe appeared to be in the past, I don't know. But it pertains very much to the
The
present.
decision you were making,
So I don't know, I don't know what's perceived as the rear view versus the present.
I think there are, they're constantly dealing with, emails, okay, for example, from external, okay, constituents, asking them,
Oh, well, those are the extra. Yes.
right?
Yes,
Y'all are on those external ones.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay. And then sometimes it's not that far off questions that comes, you know? I understand if you're dealing with a bond thing and that you're in the midst of making a decision around what direction, you know, you want to move as a board. Those are legitimate when we're in the midst of that. you know?
Yes.
I'm not saying any of them, that's the wrong word, because I'm not saying any of them are legitimate. I'm just saying,
No, I
when a
agree.
request comes, we gotta respond, right?
Yes,
And we gotta respond to you, but we also gotta respond
yes,
to constituents. And
Yes.
sometimes it takes time, you
it
know?
takes time.
It takes time,
That's
that's all I'm
why-
saying, that's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
and for me, I'm only gonna submit a FOIA request for it needs to know.
Yeah.
All the rest, I'm patient, trust me when I tell you patient. I've got requests that go back months,
Yeah,
and I'm patient.
Yeah.
Okay, just keep bringing them forward.
yeah.
Just circling back is how I start things, you know. But if I need something now, then we'll go to a FOIA request. But I won't burden the system with undue
Yeah.
FOIA requests.
Mel's been waiting for
Yes.
my
Go
defective
ahead,
peripheral
Mel.
vision.
I think the question is still fundamental in terms of how much front load we trying to do and what the projection is gonna be 3 years from now. I mean, in 3 years from now, we still hadn't shown any success academically.
Mhm.
Then all the fine tuning we could possibly do from a fiscal responsibility standpoint will still be disrespected and not known, or not agreed upon. They're gonna say, you still didn't do anything. And, you know, when you look at greater pictures, and I've been thinking about it, and I say greater pictures, the government, the federal government, and their fiscal responsibility. We tend to ignore that and overplay, and it's overplayed, but the kind of stuff that we don't know that's going on there. And here we expect every little detail to be known, and yet the business of educating is sometimes not focused upon. I mean, I don't think we have, as a board, I don't think we have a focus on the academics, like we have a focus on other things.
May I respond?
I think
May I respond? I agree. My focus has been given to me. I'm the chair of the finance committee, an elementary ed teacher. But anyway, I digress. That's my focus, and so therefore you're going to see a lot of heavy questioning in that regard as opposed to that. But let me say this. Over the years, and this is no one at this table, this is a broad statement, there were a lot of leeches in education, and they will line their pockets at the expense of our students. And they will take money out of the classroom for their own pockets, and if there's anything that galls me, it's that. And so that was actually part of my platform, the transparency piece. I'm gonna go after that hard, because ultimately,
I appreciate that.
you know,
I
so
appreciate
I know
that.
I don't sound to be much for the classroom. I know I focus on a lot of these
Well,
other
I'm not
topics.
talking about you.
But no, I know you're not focusing on me, but I recognize it in myself, but know that that's what motivates me
Yeah.
largely. Yeah, you know,
I'm saying when you look at the board, when you look at those board meetings totally, and the final 5 hours of discussion, how much of it is really on student achievement and how we improve the student achievement? I know you're gonna say all of the parts, but how much do we really know what's going on academically in this district? You know, we don't get enough information. And we get a little, you know, just call it lights, but not enough. We're not thorough enough in terms of the total picture of what we need to do.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think that our job is to empower the superintendent and make sure he gets the tools to do that. We can't
Yes,
define
but
how to
we-
fix the achievement gap.
I know that. I'm not-
Wasting
I know
But-
that.
Yeah, but he can't do it unless the financial structure of the district is a well-oiled machine. And as Joanne says, every penny's been maximized. Every time we have 10 teachers hop on a plane to a conference they don't need, it's small potatoes, but it adds up.
Yes, but the bottom line is, what about the rest of the agenda? I mean, your responsibility is to make sure he's got the pennies to do it.
So
but
here's
also to make sure he's
the
got-
other thing.
Let's go to the academic
No, I do want to be
committee.
careful with what you just said, too. I do want to be careful with what you just said. Let me share why, because I do think that there's professional growth that takes place if you go to an academic conference or you go to a conference, right? And I would just say it this way, right? If we can identify best practices that maybe we're not doing, right? And bring back here and figure out a way to proliferate those best practices to improve our performance, I'm all for that, right? I'm all for that. Now, if we're just gonna go hang out someplace, because it's nice to go, right? I am not gonna tolerate that, right? And then I think that because if we haven't been successful here in closing achievement gaps, if we don't also go and see what's happening in other places where maybe they have, or maybe there's a conference that people get a chance to share what their best practices are that have impacted it, right? Then we're just gonna do what we've done over and over again, but want different results, and that won't happen, right? I think there are lots of best practices out there, and the opportunity is there, but we should be responsible about it. I don't disagree with that, So that's the only thing about the going someplace else. Only caveat.
So Miss Robin can go home. We're
Yeah.
adjourned. We're adjourned.
Next
Keep talking.
When's the next
We
meeting?
don't have a quorum, we can keep talking.
Next meeting.
Let Robin go home.
You do have a quorum.
And when is the next meeting?
Okay, yeah, one thing we should,
Because you're not finished.
we're not finished. We can meet next week, or we can meet another night this week, and try to keep going on this.
There's a committee meeting on Tuesday and a committee meeting on Wednesday.
Right.
Thursday,
Tuesdays.
Yeah, there's 2 committee meetings.
mediation.
So,
Mediation.
It's Monday, holiday?
All right, well, we'll meet Monday night at order.
So what's happening?
There's no, can we start earlier than 5:30?
You start at
Monday?
5:30, you start at 5, if
Yeah.
Rachel to be involved, you need to start, you can't start before 5 o'clock.
All right, well, let's start at 5.
5 o'clock next Monday, is that what you said? Okay.
Should I schedule it at the district office, because they're still trying to prepare schools, and I think it's an issue, so,
Oh, I know, I almost asphyxiated.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
I will
fine. District
schedule it for
office
the
is
district
fine.
office, since they're preparing the schools.
Well, thank you all, everybody, good discussion.
Well, that's why,
Thank you.
that's why